Hello, microbiology students. I miss you. This is Mrs. V coming to you from home because this is now our new normal. Where we had left off in the class, we were talking about protozoan diseases or protozoans of medical importance. And so you hopefully still have your chart. If not, you can print it off of D2L. But we had just finished up talking about the protozoan diseases of the gastrointestinal tract. And so I'm not going to redo those since we covered that in class. Just kind of a reminder, study your chart, and there is a Quizlet for you for this chapter. So we kind of left off, if I can get this all to work, we were talking about protozoan diseases of the central nervous system. So we were going to look at 3 of them that affect the brain and the spinal cord. Some things that they all have in common, so 3 traits of the protozoan diseases of the central nervous system, are one, thankfully, that these are rare diseases, so not a large part of the population, or they are restricted to particular areas of the world. The sad thing about them is that usually, definitely if untreated, these are fatal diseases. The reason that these diseases are difficult to treat, and that's their 3rd trait, is that these parasites are hiding behind the blood-brain barrier. And so any medications that could be toxic to them, one, have to cross that blood-brain barrier. And the second one is that if they're damaging to these eukaryotic parasites, often they're damaging to the neurons as well. So they're rare, they're usually fatal, and they're difficult to treat. And so we're going to talk about Trypanosoma brucei, which causes African sleeping sickness, Toxoplasmosis gondii, which causes toxoplasmosis, and Malaria fowleri, which causes, is basically a brain-eating amoeba. So that is where we are headed for this discussion. So the first one, and I think we covered it in class, but I hate to start in the middle of the topic. Like I said, the causative agent is a flagellated protist called Trypanosoma brucei. And there are actually 2 subspecies, Trypanosoma brucei gambiense and Trypanosoma brucei rhodensiense, and that has to do with the differences are they're slightly different, but mostly in the host. I'm sorry, not in the host, in the vector, and just by the regions where the reservoir is. Sorry about that, guys. The regions of the reservoir hosts. And so gambiensis is in the central west and rhodensiense is in the east. And no, I'm not going to ask you that, but in case you were wondering and you saw that, it just has to do with the region of Africa. But all of them are the causative agent of African sleeping sickness. Okay, we're going to watch this together, just like we're in the classroom, no different. Hopefully you're comfortable in your PJs, your bathrobe.
The sleeping sickness cycle starts with a bite from a tsetse fly. If the fly bites someone who's already sick, it ingests parasites as well as blood. These parasites, called trypanosomes, accumulate in the fly's gut. 20 days later, they migrate to the tsetse fly's salivary glands and are ready to infect another victim when the fly next bites. The parasite enters the lymphatic system and then passes into the bloodstream and circulates through the body. At first, the host's immune defenses attack the parasite. To shield themselves, the parasites mutate, change form, and escape from the host's immune system, until they're recognized and attacked by another wave of antibodies. This cycle of attack and defense is repeated several times. It's accompanied by symptoms such as intermittent fever, headaches, and joint pain. Symptoms that mirror the inner struggle between the immune cells and the parasites. These first phase symptoms are sometimes too mild to be detected, but this is when it is actually easiest to treat the disease. If it isn't treated in time, the parasites advance to the brain. The blood-brain barrier is there, a filter to protect the brain against pathogens, toxins, and hormones circulating in the blood. But the trypanosomes breach it. At this stage, the disease is much more difficult to treat, as the blood-brain barrier also blocks some drug molecules. If the trypanosomes manage to enter into the brain, the sleep pattern becomes erratic. Infected people develop poor coordination and become confused, alternating between episodes of severe fatigue and agitation. Sleeping during the day, they can't sleep at night. The deterioration of the nervous system leads to coma. Left untreated, sleeping sickness is fatal.
Okay, so this is a disease that has a vector. It is transmitted by the tsetse fly, so it enters the bloodstream through a bite. Often there's a small nodule or lump at the site of the bite. The problem with this, or how it avoids the immune system, is just that it can change those surface proteins, making antibodies ineffective. So there is not an immunity to it later. It disrupts sleep, that poor coordination, and there's these cycles of confusion, sleeping, and agitation, which eventually goes into uncontrollable sleepiness, coma, and a death. As far as prevention, prevention is controlling the vector, so the tsetse fly. So insect repellents, protective clothing, traps, insecticides, clearing of the brush. The problem with eliminating the tsetse fly that makes it difficult is not just getting rid of all of the vectors, but also just to the reservoirs are African game animals. So it's kind of hard to get rid of them as well. There are anti-protozoal medications that can be used for treatment, but it is important to get to the patient before it reaches the central nervous system. And there's a table for you. So throughout these, I'm hoping to interject some questions, so please answer the questions for me. And these are 4 points, hopefully, if all goes well with D2L. All right, our next one is toxoplasmosis.
Hi, I'm Dr. Andrea Pennington, and I know what you're going through. As a medical professional, I've been working with pregnant women for several years, and I'm pleased to be talking to you today on behalf of the Food and Drug Administration. These 9 months can be an exciting time, but prepare yourself. Everyone from your favorite aunt to the local bus driver is going to be giving you advice. Welcome to the wonderful world of pregnancy. Now we have one more issue that as a pregnant woman you need to know about. Toxoplasmosis.
Toxoplasmosis in pregnancy. I have no idea what that is. Now, is that related to the cat litter? I only heard about don't change the cat litter while you're pregnant.
Do I have to give up my cat?
One of my best friends had the same fear about toxoplasmosis, but thankfully she didn't have to part with her beloved cat. It just meant she had to pay attention to a few rules. So what exactly is the link between toxoplasmosis and cats? And how do you get it?
Toxoplasmosis is an illness caused by the parasite Toxoplasma gondii. More than 60 million people in the United States carry the parasite, but very few have symptoms because our immune system keeps the parasite dormant and unable to cause illness. Toxoplasmosis can be difficult to detect. However, symptoms typically include swollen glands, fever, headache, muscle pain, or a stiff neck. If you experience any of these symptoms, you should see your healthcare provider immediately. In general, expectant mothers should be cautious because Toxoplasma infection just before or during pregnancy can cause problems for their unborn babies. As cute as they are, it's true that cats and kittens are the most common carriers of Toxoplasma gondii.
If you're a cat lover, it's understandable that you should be concerned for your baby. One very simple step you can take is to have someone else change the litter box if possible, like your husband, another adult, or a responsible person like an older child. If you must change it yourself, wear disposable gloves and wash your hands thoroughly with soap and warm water afterwards. So, this is a case where clean is critical.
Cats become carriers by eating rodents, birds, or other small animals that have been infected by Toxoplasma gondii, and the parasite is then spread through the cat feces. So soil, litter boxes, sand boxes, and any place where cat feces can be found should be avoided by pregnant women.
Cat lovers, follow these tips to reduce your risk of exposing yourself to Toxoplasma. Change the litter box daily. The parasite does not become infectious until 1 to 5 days after it is shed in the feces. Feed your cat commercial dry or canned food. Don't feed your cat raw meat or table scraps. Cover your outdoor sandboxes. And keep indoor cats indoors.
Toxoplasmosis can also be spread through animals such as pigs, sheep, and deer. You can become infected by eating undercooked pork, lamb, or venison, or by handling the raw meat and not washing your hands afterwards. The risk of toxoplasmosis is another reason why it's extremely important to cook meats to proper temperatures.
For more information on food safety during your pregnancy, visit the FDA website as shown on your screen. I'm Dr. Andrea Pennington, wishing...
Okay, so the causative agent of toxoplasmosis is Toxoplasma gondii. Most people just say Gondii. Once again, we have these Latin. No one's speaking Latin anymore. So there's 3 ways. You can get it foodborne, so it can be transmitted by eating raw or undercooked meat, specifically pork, lamb, and venison. It can be transmitted from animal to human, and that is from the accidental ingestion of oocysts from the soil, so usually from kittens and from cats. And so this is the reason for the covers on the sandbox, and this is why changing cat litter when a woman is pregnant. Usually if someone is healthy and they've come into contact with toxoplasma, and not to shock you or anything, but the Center of Disease Control says that about 40 million people in the U.S. carry Toxoplasma gondii. For most people, they're going to be asymptomatic. It is a problem. The 2 groups that you're going to be concerned with are the immunocompromised and pregnant women. In the immunocompromised, this can form a latent infection, and that is when it's going to affect the central nervous system. It can then cause encephalitis. So basically that's swelling, the inflammation in the brain, which can lead to seizures, paralysis, and coma. So it can be fatal. It can also cause retinitis. It can also affect the eyes and cause blindness. The concern for mothers is that it is transmitted to the fetus, and it causes congenital toxoplasmosis when it is transmitted vertically, so from mother to fetus. The earlier in the pregnancy, the more detrimental it is. It can lead to miscarriage. It can lead to stillbirth. After the child is born, it can cause developmental delays and can cause vision problems later in life. So like I said, the prevention is to cook meat thoroughly and to avoid ingesting oocysts from cat feces. And so this is showing you there's an immature form called the tachyozoite when there's a first infection. And then what it does is it's going to form tissue cysts in the intermediate host. So let's just take a look at the life cycle. Okay, so here's our poor pregnant woman cleaning out the cat boxes, and that's sad that no one would do that for her. So like I said, there's 2 ways that humans can get toxoplasmosis. So you can get it from another animal by eating that infected raw or undercooked meat, or by poor meat handling preparation, so not washing your hands, touching the meat, and then sticking your fingers in your mouth. And then the other way is when a cat has an infection, it is the definitive host. So the parasite is going through sexual reproduction and the cat is shedding large volumes of oocysts. And so they're shed into the cat litter, or if they're in your child's sandbox or outdoors in garden soil, they are shed into the soil. They take about 1 to 5 days to mature into sporozoites, and then just accidental ingestion, just by touching them and then touching your mouth or your lips. Like I said, humans are the intermediate hosts. So what's occurring inside the human once the oocyst is ingested in the small intestines, it becomes a sporozoite. Those tachyozoites, they just reproduce asexually very rapidly. And from the small intestine, those tachyozoites then can go to other tissues. And so they can go to the heart, the brain, and skeletal muscle. Usually the immune system is going to lock this down and limit this, but it is a possibility that humans and everyone is carrying around these cysts of the Toxoplasmosis gondii. And so what happens, like I said, as people are immunocompromised later in life, then from these cysts, then you can have a reactivation of that infection. And then, like I said, then they can go further to the brain or to the eye. So a definitive host is the cat, because that is where sexual reproduction occurs. Humans are intermediate hosts, along with, I kind of put on your chart, kind of every other animal. So small mammals, like I said, pig, sheep, deer. There's even accounts where there was transmission through unpasteurized goat milk. So there's a lot of intermediate hosts, but the cat is the definitive host and the one shedding the oocysts. And so you can have an indoor cat, make sure it doesn't hunt. When pregnant women go to their healthcare provider, usually they are screened to see if they have Toxoplasmosis gondii or antibodies to that protozoan, and then there would not be a risk of transferring it to their offspring, to the baby. Okay, and so here is this chart for you, and pretty much just kind of said everything we just talked about. There are antimicrobial medications that are given to immunodeficient individuals with latent infections, and there is something that can be done for women when they are pregnant as well for treatment. But the best is prevention. Okay, our last protozoan parasite of the central nervous system is primary amoebic meningoencephalitis. It's quite the mouthful, so PAM. The causative agent is Malaria fowleri. This one, it is very rare, thankfully. This is an amoeba that lives in warm, fresh waters, and it enters the host basically up through the nose while someone is swimming. It goes up those little holes in your skull, if you guys remember your cribriform plate and those olfactory foramina, and basically the amoeba go through those holes to the olfactory nerves and enter the brain and basically start to eat the brain. And so the symptoms are very much like meningitis. It is often misdiagnosed. And so meningitis is either bacterial or viral. Usually if it's misdiagnosed, the patient is given antibiotics, which will not do anything against the amoeba. And so within days, someone can die without care. So only 4 out of the 130 cases in the United States have survived. Early treatment is the key. And I have given you a video to watch. It is 7 minutes and 22 seconds long. It is really well done. I suggest that you watch it to kind of just lock that in the plight. Usually these are going to be young people because kids go underwater and splash around more, but it's always going to be by swimming in warm, fresh water environments. And there is basically the chart from the textbook about primary amoebic meningoencephalitis. Okay, so those were the 3 that affect the central nervous system. And like I said, the prime characteristics of those are they are rare, they are difficult to treat, and they are fatal if they are not treated, and even sometimes with treatment is very difficult. And I think we just have two more. So the next one is, the disease is called Trichomoniasis. It is a disease of the genitourinary tract, so it is an STI, so it's sexually transmitted infection. The causative agent is Trichomonas vaginalis. It is transmitted through intimate vaginal contact, and it can also through vertical transmission. So it can cause preterm birth when given, passed from mother to fetus. There is no cyst form, so it is easily killed by drying, but it can live on moist surfaces. So this little trophozoite, it is flagellated. So we have 4 flagella, we have an undulating membrane, just like in Trypanosoma, and there is a barb for attachment onto the mucosa. The region it's called Trichomonas vaginalis is that they are it infects men. Usually, most men are asymptomatic, and usually it's going to be passed back and forth between men and women. So in women, it does called vaginitis, so inflammation of the vagina, and so you'll have frothy, odorous, usually green to yellowish discharge. This causes painful intercourse if there are symptoms, or urethritis in the urethra of both males and women, which causes dysuria, which is painful urination. Like I said, the problem is it's asymptomatic. Both partners need to be treated, and there are anti-protozoan drugs. One is called Flagyl as treatment. And I did give you a video to watch at the end. So our very last one is going to be malaria. It is the #1 global killer. So 2 billion infections per year and about 3 million deaths. And most of these deaths are going to occur in children under 5 in Africa. There's actually 5 species of Plasmodium that cause malaria: Plasmodium vivax, Falciparum, malariae, and ovale. And then the fifth one, I only put 4. The fifth one is actually more for primates, but there has been some crossover of species, so I just put 4 there. I think I put 5 on your chart, so we'll just go with that. There's many Plasmodium species, and so the difference is just going to be where it occurs. They're slightly different in their life cycles, slightly different in their appearance and their severity. But the big signs and symptoms is going to be recurrent cycles of what are called paroxysmal fever, intense chills, anemia, hepatosplenomegaly. So hepato means liver, spleno means spleen, megaly means enlargement. We're going to look at the life cycle in a minute, and malaria causes large numbers of abnormal red blood cells and just also their immature forms in the blood that are getting filtered by the liver and the spleen, which can cause them to enlarge. And so these cycles of feeling absolutely horrible, having chills and fever, and just being exhausted by that, with periods of being healthy. So we're going to look at the life cycle. Like I said, the big prevention, if you did the lab and went through that, is eradication of the vector. There are vaccines under development, but there is currently not a vaccine.
The parasite Plasmodium falciparum is responsible for most of the world's malaria cases. It has evolved in concert with its human and mosquito hosts and displays a complex life cycle that alternates between the two. An infected female mosquito transfers the parasite to a human when she takes a blood meal. The parasite, in the form of sporozoites, is injected with her saliva, which contains an anticoagulant that promotes a steady blood flow. The circulatory system delivers the sporozoites to their target, the liver. A sporozoite enters a liver cell and begins to feed and grow. During the process, the parasite's nucleus divides many times, and then the nuclei bud off to produce thousands of new plasmodium cells, now in a form called merozoites. About a week later, the merozoites burst out of liver cells and enter the bloodstream. In the bloodstream, the merozoites infect red blood cells, where they again reproduce and burst out of the infected cells. The resulting merozoites can infect other red blood cells, yielding a cycle of infection and eruption. Malaria is characterized by repeated bouts of fever, each of which correlates with the synchronous release of merozoites from a population of red blood cells. Some of the infecting merozoites develop into sexual forms called gametocytes, which are either male or female. In the life cycle of Plasmodium falciparum, gametocytes become large oval structures within red blood cells. The gametocytes do not harm the human host, but when a mosquito takes the gametocytes into its gut during a blood meal, these cells initiate the next stage of the Plasmodium life cycle. In the mosquito's gut, the gametocytes escape from the red blood cells and develop into male and female sex cells called gametes. A male and a female gamete fuse to produce the first cell of the next generation, the zygote. The zygote matures into a motile cell called an ookinete and migrates to the wall of the mosquito's gut, where it develops into an oocyst. Inside the oocyst, cell division occurs to produce many new cells, again in the form of sporozoites. The oocyst ruptures and releases the sporozoites, which migrate to the salivary glands. From the salivary glands, the sporozoites can infect the next human host and repeat the Plasmodium life cycle.
Okay, so let's take a look at what we just watched. So the Anopheles mosquito, it is only the female that does the biting. That is going to be the vector and for us, and so that is how one contracts malaria, is through the bite of an infected mosquito. And so it is injected through that bite into the bloodstream, and then it's going to go to the liver. So for malaria life cycle, there's a liver stage, and then there's a red blood cell stage and a mosquito stage. So the liver stage in the human, the sporozoites are going to enter the liver cells, and liver cells are called hepatocytes, and they're going to go through asexual reproduction through schizogony. And then they are going to be released from the hepatocytes. The hepatocytes are going to die, they're going to rupture, and then they're going to circulate, and then they are going to enter the red blood cells, and so the erythrocytes. And this is where they are wreaking their damage basically on the human, because this is where the symptoms come from. And what's strange about it is that the cycle within a human body and these red blood cells gets synchronized. So they're all doing it at the same time. So inside the red blood cells, they are dividing once again asexually by schizogony. And so the person that has the infection are going to have just these cycles that first they're going to feel chills, they're going to have fevers, they're going to have sweats, and then they're going to have 24 to 48 hours where they feel fine. Because what's happening is that they're dividing, and then they're going to break out of the erythrocytes, and then they can go to infect new red blood cells. And so it just kind of goes through this cycle. What's happening if this continues on without treatment, since the red blood cells are being lysed, and the effect of the parasite with the hemoglobin is that that iron can't be recycled, so it leads to anemia, exhaustion, and then also, like I said, untreated death, particularly in children. Some of these sporozoites from the red blood cells are going to take a different path of development, and they're going to form gametocytes, so both male and female. And so when a mosquito bites a person infected with Plasmodium, it's taken up in that blood meal, and then those gametocytes are going to go to the gut of the mosquito, form gametes, then they go through sexual reproduction. And so the mosquito is going to be the definitive and the primary host. And then once they go through reproduction, then there's a release of those mature sporozoites that go to the salivary glands, and then that mosquito is then ready to infect another person. A person over the course of their lifetime will get some immunity to malaria, but like I said, usually those that die are going to be children under 5, so they don't have that immunity. There is a lot of work and a big movement by the World Health Organization to come up with a vaccine and to eradicate mosquito. If you remember from our lab, just getting rid of the vector or reducing the vector is certainly a lot of help in reducing the numbers of malaria cases. Okay, so that is the last 2 on that sheet. So this kind of wraps up our protozoans. So do study your chart, play the Quizlet, and then answer the quiz questions. Like I said, I'm really hoping this works. And then those will give you some points going to your grade. Have a great day.